rhythm and blues Chicago style. It was blues. It was rock and roll. It's all right. Have a good time. And it was Windy City soul. Whoa, it's all right. On a musical mile in Chicago, independent record companies pumped out hits that made America dance. Oh, did the body baby dance, Ray?
It was a different sound. The world loved something different.
It's amazing that this is black music. There weren't any black entrepreneurs in it.
We tried to set the standard for what black people should do in the record business.
We had the best music, and we gave the best parties. I mean, it was the best.
It was the dawn of rhythm and blues, and on one Chicago street, R&B history was made. This is Etta James, and the street was Record Row.
Major funding for Record Row, Cradle of Rhythm and Blues, was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the Central Educational Network, the Illinois Humanities Council, and the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences.
Black Chicago. In the 1950s, it was booming. 800,000 African Americans called the Windy City home, and 2,000 more black folk arrived from the South every week. They came for jobs in northern factories and steel mills. They came for a chance at a better life. And in Chicago, they found so many ways to enjoy themselves. In Southside nightclubs and beer joints, they danced to live music and to records spinning on the jukebox. But to hear this music over the airwaves, black Chicagoans tuned their radio to one voice.
Now it's time for your old friend and swing master, Al Benson.
Thank you. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am, all ready and all set to bring to you 30 minutes of red-hot, beat-me-down, bring-you-up swing tunes of today. And now it's on with the show.
Benson was the first DJ in the city to broadcast the gut-bucket Delta blues of the South and the up-tempo rhythms from the West Coast. Al Benson played rhythm and the blues, and it was just what black Chicago wanted to hear. With Benson playing the music and blacks earning more money, sales of R&B records soared. In segregated America of the 1950s, black music was basically ignored by most major record labels. Only a handful of small companies made records for black consumers. But as the demand for black music grew, dozens of independent record companies sprang up to cash in on a new market. Chicago was soon buzzing, with companies recording rhythm and blues. Several of these record labels settled on South Michigan Avenue, a street that was known as Record Row. The street has changed a lot since its heyday in the late 50s and early 60s. Tattered buildings, small businesses, and parking lots hide Record Row's former glory, when it was home to 17 record distributors and a half a dozen record labels with names like Chess, Wonderful, Chance, King, Constellation, Brunswick, and VJ. Back then, the street was hot. Record labels fought to be the first to get their song on the radio. Would-be producers covered the city looking for talent. Steel workers and cab drivers became stars overnight.
Daddy gonna give me old horse and carriage.
There was such an abundance of excitement that was created in this little area between Roosevelt Road and 22nd Street.
Everyone knew everyone. We all ate at the same restaurant, Fats Restaurant in the New Michigan Hotel.
Many times a guy would start at one end trying to sell you his song or master and work his way up. Sometimes they'd sell it 2 or 3 times and be laughing all the time.
Back in those days, you could hit every major company in the world in 2 blocks.
It was unbelievable. You could walk down one side and up the other, and you would run into somebody with a hit record in their back pocket.
The music that drove Record Row was mostly black music, written and performed by black artists. But most of the power was in the hands of white record men like Leonard and Phil Chess, 2 of the most loved, hated, and influential men in the black music industry. They came over from Poland with their family in 1928.
My dad had a junkyard on 29th and State Street, and my brother and me used to go and help him during the summer and on Saturdays. Right across the street was a little run-down shack. There was a church. And when they get in a groove on a Saturday or Sunday, start clapping their hands, man, you'd stand there and you couldn't help but jump to the music. That's when we first heard the music.
In 1945, the Chess brothers owned a nightclub for blacks called the Macomba Lounge. They hired musicians to entertain the crowd with jazz and urban blues. Blacks crowded these clubs for the nightlife and the music. Leonard and Phil saw an opportunity. There weren't many recordings of these musicians, so they quit the bar business and became record men and started up a relationship with DJ Al Benson.
Al Benson would play a record 4 times in a row if you took care of him right. And you'd have instant reaction. He was the first with a major black listening audience. Major, because that's the only place they could hear it.
I went down to Eli to get my pistol out of barn.
Many blues artists were unskilled laborers by day and blues men by night. They brought their harmonicas and guitars from the South and amplified them, creating a new sound, urban blues. The first hit maker for Chess Records was a truck driver named McKinley Morganfield, better known as Muddy Waters.
Just don't work on you.
Muddy's vocal style and bottleneck guitar playing were born in the Mississippi Delta, and his music influenced a generation of blues and rock musicians.
Had a pretty little girl, but I lose my baby boy, it ain't that bad.
Muddy Waters, along with the Chess Records, invented that amplified harmonica and guitar here in Chicago.
Muddy was Chess Records. To me, it was Chess Records. He was the foundation.
And on that foundation, Chess built the #1 blues label in the world. Their artists were legendary: Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson, and Jimmy Rogers. The Chess brothers were equal partners in the company, but it was Leonard who was the driving force. He was a sharp businessman with a streetwise personality and a hot temper that spared no one, not even his own son.
I once asked him when I first started working there what my job was. He got really mad at me. What the f*** are you asking me that? Watching me is your job. And when you're ready, I'll let you do something. You just gotta watch me. You watch me eat, you watch me drive, you watch me talk. That's what he said. He got mad that I asked it.
Leonard and Phil Chess knew the music, but they weren't of the music. So in 1951, Leonard hired bass player Willie Dixon to help out in the studio.
Oh, when my baby kissed me and squeezed me real tight, she looked me in the eyes and say, everything's all right. I get nervous.
Willie Dixon soon became producer, talent scout, and songwriter for the label. His music propelled the careers of many blues artists and helped Chess and Chicago become a magnet for blues musicians.
At one point in time, Chicago was the capital of the world in blues. You can ask the Rolling Stones or the Claptons or whoever came here.
The blues is a basic backbone of just about every form of popular music there is in this century.
Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5,
Chicago has produced, everybody that turned me on. But I must say that those guys, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy, and John Lee, the greats are gents. Always. I always got the feeling that they looked upon us as little seeds they'd planted that had come home.
Leave me, honey. I have lots of fun. I'm a rolling stone.
As unique and important as Chess was, there was another company just 6 blocks down the street that also made history, VJ Records, the most financially successful black-owned record company before Motown.
Good night, sweetheart, well, it's time to go home.
VJ started in 1953 with a doo-wop group called the Spaniels. Their catalog covered blues, jazz, gospel, R&B, and rock and roll. In fact, VJ was the first American company to sign the Beatles.
What you have to know about VJ Records is that the V stood for Vivian, and the J stood for Jimmy, which was Jimmy Bracken.
Everything was special about VJ Records. When somebody said, what was special about VJ Records? Okay, VJ Records was started by a woman who had been a waitress in the Club de Lisa. Her name was Vivian Carter Bracken. She was a student of Al Benson, and she went over into Gary and started a radio show and opened up a record store. And out of opening up this record store, said these people come in here and they buy these records, and some of these records are hard to find. And she told her husband, who owned a little shoe shine parlor and stuff, and said, why don't we start making these records?
So Vivian and her husband, Jimmy Bracken, took a $500 loan from a pawn shop and built a multi-million-dollar business.
Well, I tried to tell you, baby, wouldn't make no sense.
When Vivian and Jimmy were auditioning one blues singer, a backup musician named Jimmy Reed caught their ear. They asked him if he'd written any songs, and Jimmy said, no, but I've made up a few. Jimmy Reed became the label's top blues man and helped VJ give Chess a run for its money in the blues market.
Well, it's a shame, shame, shame. Oh, it's a shame on you.
But you don't find artists like Jimmy Reed too often. A hit record has to be crafted, and Calvin Carter, the label's chief producer and Vivian's younger brother, was responsible for the creative side of VJ.
Calvin Carter was a strange mixture. Actor, musician, politician, crybaby, ex-Marine Corps. He had this soul, this thing inside of him that heard unusual talent. Calvin Carter was a non-musician musician. I mean, he didn't play anything, but he could hear everything.
He loved me, I want to know. How can I tell if he loved me so? Is it in his eyes? Oh, no, you'll be
I recall the Shoop Shoop song with Betty Everett, and he had people stomping on telephone books to get that doop, 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 doop.
Oh, yeah, or is it in his face? Oh, no, it's just a charm.
People often wondered, how in the world did he get that sound out of the bass drum? Well, it wasn't the bass drum. It was people stomping on telephone books.
Calvin knew talent, and Vivian understood what was happening and could play it, and but they didn't have the knowledge of the industry or the background to take it beyond where they were, and Jimmy was smart and knew that. So they kind of brought me in and immediately made me general manager of the company, and 2 years later made me president.
Not only was he a genius in terms of marketing and merchandising, Hubert Abner was one of those guys who could stay up for 3 or 4 days at a time and just entertain people and hypnotize them and draw them into his spirit.
And I had some dreams and some visions, see, about it. I had watched the white companies. I'd watched Chess take Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Willie Dixon. I'd watched Atlantic in New York, you know, and saw what they did. And so I said, hey, man, you know, this talent here, we can do this.
Abner knew black DJs were vital to record sales, and in those days, DJs were paid to play. Not only was it legal, it was expected.
I was the bag man for the company. By that, I mean I take the bag out, cash type money out, because even though you sent the jocks the checks on a regular basis, this was sort of like a retainer. See, this was a retainer to keep the relationship cool, okay, so that your records can be at least considered to be played. Now, when you want serious play, now that's a whole, that escalates to another level, see. Now you got to go out there and you got to put the green on them, okay. And you got to be a friend to do that. You know, we go to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you know, get wasted with them, party with them, play cards with them. I mean, they became friends.
With Abner making the connections, VJ artists were getting airplay on black stations around the country. They had every kind of music a black audience could want.
I love the way you walk. I love the way you...
From the blues of John Lee Hooker to the doo-wop hits of the Magnificents and the Eldorados. And gospel songs from the Staple Singers and the Caravans. Record sales soared, and so did black businesses along Record Row. Despite racial barriers and segregation, Record Row was a rare place where black entrepreneurs could grab a piece of the American dream.
With the creation of Record Row came the creation of many new opportunities for black professionals. Black professional musicians, accountants, businessmen, entrepreneurs. The Leaner brothers, for example, formed the United Distributors.
United Record Distributors started up when DJ Al Benson gave a loan to his nephews, Ernie and George Leaner, two ambitious brothers from Mississippi.
United Record Distributors was the first and only black independent record distributor in the United States.
They focused on black music and hired black personnel to ship and promote records to black DJs across the country, giving them a competitive edge against other distributors.
It also made the other distributors hire black salesmen, promotion men that were not involved, because as we were going to the WVONs and the other radio stations, then they said, well, how come y'all can't have folk that look like the folk that come from United?
Remember now, this was the only black distributorship in Chicago. And we were, you know, proud of them. I mean, they were there with the big boys and holding their own.
Record Row provided role models. You know, I'm sure no one quite looked at it in that way at that time, but it did send a signal that black entrepreneurship can work.
The rhythm and blues industry on Record Row was born out of segregation, just like the race film industry of the 1930s, which reflected black life, and the Negro baseball leagues that gave blacks their own national pastime. But there was an important difference. These entertainments were confined to black communities. But rhythm and blues music was on the radio, and the airways carried it across America's color line. A few white DJs even began playing the music, like Alan Freed, who called it rock and roll to make it more acceptable to the parents of white teenagers.
You women have heard of jalopies, you've heard the noise they make,
but call it rock and roll or rhythm and blues, it was still black music, and segregationists campaigned to stop it.
We've set up a 20-man committee to do away with this vulgar, animalistic, nigger rock and roll box.
the protest about the music had more to do with the social policies of the South, of keeping the races apart, and at the same time keeping this black, so-called black influence out of the community.
Womp bom loom bom lump bom bom tootie boot oh root tootie boot oh root.
The black kids, the white kids were listening to this music. So what the record companies had to do was to figure, and radio stations, the music was in demand, well, how can we give these teenagers the music that they want to hear and not offend their parents? So the solution was cover records.
Know just what to do. I went through the east, I went through the west. She's a gal that I love, man. Doody Rudy, oh Rudy, Doody Rudy, oh Rudy, woo, Doody.
Our music was made acceptable to the general market by these white artists covering it, because the radio stations would not play the black artists playing the record. But that same record done very close to, in fact, they copy the arrangement, copy everything, by white artists was acceptable to the pop stations, and they play it.
Life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above.
If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love, life could be a dream, sweetheart.
Sweetly, 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 dream. I'm as happy as can be.
Used to have jokes every time that Laverne Baker would do a song, Georgia Gibbs over here would cover it immediately, do the same song, and Laverne would sell to the black market X number, you know, and Georgia would sell to the white market X to the 10th power or something.
A lot of stations wouldn't play Laverne Baker. They would play the cover versions by Georgia Gibbs or Pat Boone or whoever was doing it. That was, there's a big stink about nothing. And the truth of the music eventually came through. The real artists got their due.
Usually when people are not personally affected by an injury, they have a tendency to think in terms of the injury not being so great. The Spaniels, for instance, record a song called Good Night, Sweetheart, Good Night. Sell 500,000 copies, basically in the black community. The McGuire sisters records the same song, sells 2 or 3 million copies. It's about money. And when you are denied access to a market based on the color of your skin, that becomes personal. It no longer becomes much to do about nothing.
As strong as racism was, capitalism was even stronger. When white kids grew bored with covers and started demanding the real thing, white DJs started playing it.
Maybelline, why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline, can't you be true? Just started back doing the things you used to do. Wow.
It was a dramatic turning point in pop music history. Black music began to cross over to white radio. In 1955, one of the biggest crossover artists out of Chicago was Chuck Berry on Chess Records.
I'm in Michigan, and I got the radio on. And I was like, God damn, I said, that's Maybelline. Well, I mean, in about an hour, I must have heard it about 8 or 10 times. I said, God damn. Next thing I know, I got a call. Hey, my brother, man, forget the goddamn Parents' Weekend. Get your butt back here, man. We got to ship records.
Chuck Berry wrote songs that exploited the white teen experience, with tales of high school, lost loves, and new cars.
To cool down, the heat went down, that's when I heard that highway sound. Cadillac sitting like a ton of lead, 110, half a mile ahead. Cadillac looked like setting still, and I caught Maybelline at the top of the hill. Maybelline!
We had something that was the right time and the right sound for America.
They called Elvis Presley the king of rock and roll. I disagree. I'll agree with Chuck Berry. He said he was the king of rock and roll, and I believe it. I really do.
Earlier that year, another chess artist, Ellis McDaniel, better known as Bo Diddley, also crossed over to a white teen audience. But he might never have been a chess artist at all if VJ Records just down the street hadn't rejected him.
Hey, Bo Diddley!
They wasn't interested because I was playing something different and something they never heard before. It sounded too primitive or something other. I guess that's what it was, you know. And I went to Chess and Phil Chess called Leonard and told Leonard that hey, this cat got something different here, you know, it's just might turn out to be something. Let's try it, and here I am.
Let's run one down, Bo. Rolling, Master A, take one.
Bo played the guitar with a drum-like rhythm, a technique that got him a spot on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1955.
He had a big record out called Bo Diddley. At the same time, there was a big record out called 16 Ton. Now, this big honcho, what's his name, Sullivan, wants Bo Diddley to do 16 Ton. Bo Diddley said, man, I'm not goddamn saying, I don't know nothing about no 16 Ton.
I'm supposed to be playing my hit song, you understand me? Not 16 tons. Why you got 16 tons?
Now, he don't know Bo Diddley from Adam, man. I mean, he never listened to that. He gets up there and he waits for him to do 16 Ton, and he does Bo Diddley.
Oh, Diddley bought a paper diamond ring. If that diamond ring don't shine. Oh, Diddley, take it to a private eye. If that private eye can't say, he will not take the ring from me.
When it was over, he said, you'll never be on my show again.
Bo didn't have to be on Sullivan's Show again. That one appearance was enough to make him a million seller and put Chess Records on the map. For VJ Records, Bo Diddley was the one that got away. But there were plenty of crossover successes for VJ. Dee Clark was one of them, with pop hits like Raindrops and Hey Little Girl.
Dee had an amazing voice, a clear, tenor, penetrating voice, and could just sing his butt off.
This throbbing in my brain, so strange I can't explain, but I like it. I like it. Like it. How about that?
Dee was a man who sounded like a woman in the high register, and that was unique. I said, wow, what is that?
His music, probably 75% of it sold to white people. It wasn't what you call real soul. It was called, we used to call it the happy flute sound because they used flutes in the background of the records.
How about that?
In 1962, two independent producers, Bill Bunky Shepherd and Carl Davis, brought a song and a singer to VJ. They had a hunch that he'd be a sensation.
As I walk through this world, nothing can stop a do-over.
I put the song together in a rehearsal. We were just opening up our throats, do 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 do, going up the scales, and I just told them to say do do. It was really do do do, D-O-D-O, and we began to say do do do.
I said, we got to cut that tomorrow because the session was the next day. And they said, wait, no, we don't have no lyrics for this song. I said, well, go home and write something.
And it was, to me, a strange sounding record. Duke, 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 duke. There's a whole bunch of dukes, you know. But Calvin said, Calvin Carter, again, the ear. Calvin said, Ab, that's a smash.
I'll never forget, we released the Duke of Earl November the 5th, 1962. And by Christmas, it was almost the #1 record in the country.
The Duke of Earl sold over 1 million copies and helped make VJ one of the most successful R&B labels in the country. But for Abner, it wasn't enough. He wanted VJ to tap the dollars of the white pop market. To do that, the label would need more than crossover music.
Racism was a fact of life. It existed, and segregation, all that kind of stuff. So what? I mean, I hate it, and it's bad, and it's wrong, and it's immoral, and all that kind of stuff, but I got to move. We had white guys that worked for us who did promotion in the South. We had Red Schwartz who did promotion for us on the East Coast. Whatever it took to get whatever we needed, I'd hire it. I didn't see any reason why VJ shouldn't be what we call a full-line label. Jazz, blues, spiritual, country and western, pop. I thought we could do it, and we set about doing it.
And they did. VJ had one of the biggest hits in jazz history with Eddie Harris's Exodus to Jazz. And in 1962, Abner put VJ on the map in the pop market. VJ launched the Four Seasons.
Big girl, they don't cry. Big girl, don't cry.
But the move that assured VJ a place in rock and roll history happened in 1962 when they went to EMI Records in England to pick up the U.S. rights to a British crooner, Frank Ifield.
I remember you.
As part of the deal, EMI threw in a group that was popular in England but virtually unknown in America. Once again, it was a story of one record company picking up a group that another company turned down. EMI first offered the Beatles to its own American subsidiary, Capitol Records.
But if Capitol doesn't want it, then EMI is free to peddle it. So Capitol, for some reason or another, whoever was in charge at that time said, I don't like this stuff, no. And so I said, okay, let's go for it.
The Beatles were hot in Europe, but their first American single, Please Please Me, didn't even crack the top 100 in the U.S. So after one more disappointing single, in the spring of '63, VJ put their plans for the Beatles along with the rest of the master tapes on the shelf. As the 60s arrived, R&B began to embrace the sounds of the black church and turn away from the blues. It was music we would later call soul. The dawn of soul in Chicago was VJ's For Your Precious Love by The Impressions, featuring lead singer Jerry Butler and a 16-year-old singer and guitarist Curtis Mayfield.
We loved singing For Your Precious Love. That was one of our better songs, and of course that's what we used to audition. And we won over with that particular song.
Curtis became the most prolific songwriter of the Chicago soul era, but it was Jerry Butler who wrote the lyrics to For Your Precious Love.
Rolling Stone magazine said that our recording of For Your Precious Love kind of ushered in what people later became to know as soul music. That there was this wonderful marriage of the street and the church, the secular and the spiritual.
Jerry Butler went solo in 1959, and several of his early hits were written and composed with Curtis Mayfield.
He don't love you like I love you. He's trying to tear us apart.
With Jerry Butler gone, Curtis took over the Impressions, and with Fred Cash and Sam Gooden, the group blended mellow R&B harmonies and black gospel styles. The result was silky smooth soul.
Say it's alright, it's alright. Say it's alright, it's alright, it's alright. Have a good time, 'cause it's alright. Whoa, it's alright. We're gonna move it slow. When nights are low, when you move it slow, it sounds like a moan, and it's alright. Whoa, it's alright.
Curtis Mayfield wrote some of the greatest love songs of all time, as far as I'm concerned. My favorite Curtis Mayfield song is Rainbow. God, singing it for 30 years. And I have the same feeling. It drives me into the same world of ecstasy. I'm trying to do something to him out there.
Yeah.
Well, there always has been a Chicago sound. I mean, there's so many fantastic artists, whether they be blues, contemporary, or gospel, were recorded out of Chicago.
One of those artists was Major Lance. He danced his way on to the pop charts with Curtis Mayfield's Monkey Time. But it was the producer of the Duke of Earl, Carl Davis, who made Major Lance a star.
I don't know how to start it.
He was a boxer. He was a little prize fighter, so he could dance. I mean, he had moves that you wouldn't believe. But Major was not the world's greatest singer. So what we did was we got the impressions, which was Fred, Sam, and Curtis, and they did the background. And there were, in the spots that Major was weak at, we had the background do the lead with him.
When you look at the guys who were part of the Chicago music scene, Carl Davis as a producer, no recognition whatsoever, but I don't know if there was anybody from that era, 60s and 70s, that could go any deeper in terms of knowledge of record production and instincts.
From the mid-1960s through the early 70s, Carl Davis headed up Brunswick Records and pumped out hits with artists like the Shy-Lights. Brunswick was part of a soul music explosion out of the city. Black teenagers danced to music from Chicago companies with names as upbeat as their sounds. OK, Wonderful, Marvelous, Constellation, Mercury, ABC Paramount, Chess, and Curtom. While these labels and others competed for Black America's attention, a label out of Detroit stepped up to steal the show. Motown reshaped R&B for mainstream America. They made it easy to dance to, added sequence, slick choreography, and captured both white and black audiences. One of their biggest innovations was the way they presented their artists.
Teaching artists how to walk, talk, dress, perform, everything else. That, hence before, I don't think had been done, not to that extent.
Billy Davis was the songwriting partner of Motown president Barry Gordy until Leonard Chess brought him to Chicago in 1961.
Leonard saw Motown rise and prosper, you know, so he wasn't dumb. He realized he had to do something different in order to sell more records.
Davis left the slick pop sound of Detroit behind and went to work with Chicago artists, steeped in gospel and rough-edge rhythm and blues. At Chess, he found artists like Sugar Pie DeSanto, Mitty Collier, Minnie Riperton, and me, Etta James.
I believe that something got a hold on me, yeah, yeah. Oh, something got a hold on me right now, yeah.
I loved Etta because she had this, she was pre-Aretha, a great voice with a great soul, great heart.
Step by step, I got a brand new walk. I even sound sweeter when I talk. I said,
And she was such a character. Remember, she'd come with an entourage, a dressmaker, hairdresser, this, that. And she was definitely in the top echelon of a woman singer. Man, she could sing.
In the Billy Davis era, Chess added pop influences and full-blown arrangements and began to move away from the blues to music aimed at a new black generation. One act that found success with the label's new R&B sound started out as a doo-wop group, the Dells.
When we were kids, we came to Chess, and then Chess told Marvin, our lead singer, said, he asked me, he said, do you have a job? Marvin said, yeah, I got a job. I said, well, keep it, because you'll never be a singer. That's the one time Leonard Chess was wrong.
Oh, what a that's why I love you so. Sitting in the bar, waiting for you.
Soul had many different sounds at Chess. The love ballads of Billy Stewart and the sweet voice of Fontella Bass.
A lot of people thought Rescue Me for years was a Motown sound because it was so up, but it was really a Chicago sound. And we used to argue about the Motown and the Chicago and the Motowns and the Chicago, you know. So we both stole from one another, so.
Rescue Me was so big that it topped the pop charts and the R&B charts. But crossover success never sidetracked Leonard Chess from his main focus, the black audience.
The Black Giant.
WVON, Giant Sound of Soul.
In the 60s, Black Chicago tuned to a low-powered radio station Leonard Chess brought in 1963. It was the first 24-hour black music station in the city.
Their playlists definitely helped record sales because if you weren't on their list, the stores wouldn't stock the product. You had to be on WVON.
Here's a lovely girl, honey. Her name is Bob Racklin. She says, love makes the woman.
Because it was the powerhouse black station in Chicago that made it one of the powerhouse black stations in America and thus a trendsetter. If you could break a record or get a record happening in Chicago, it served as a precedent for getting it happening in New York or LA or Detroit.
That's a gas, and it's Herbert Rogers King here.
I don't think there's a radio station in the world that was hotter than this one when it was hot. And the amazing thing about it is we were 1,000 watts in the day and 250 at night. The big radio stations like WGN, WBBM, they were 50,000 watts. Even with that, we were #1. It was phenomenal. Everything was just phenomenal. But of course, everything Leonard Chess touched took off for him.
Leonard bought VON to boost record sales and to make money from commercials, but it grew into something more significant.
The VON stood for Voice of the Negro. And yes, I think that station, more than any station I know of, lived up to the fact that it was the voice of the black community.
The community relied on them to keep them informed on what was happening, what was going on, what causes were worth supporting, you know, what positions to take, who to get mad at. You know what I mean? In addition to selling grease for your hair and all the rest of that stuff, they did these other kinds of things too. But they were community people. They were more than disc jockeys.
People get ready, have a train a-coming.
Black Chicago tuned to VON to hear news about the struggle for civil rights, the fight to end segregation and for basic freedoms, the right to vote, the right to an education, and open housing. And the music began to reflect the call for black power. In Chicago, Curtis Mayfield was writing soul music with a message.
We're a winner, and never let anybody say, well, you can't make it.
Does it always have to be a love song? It can be a song of controversy, a song of inspiration. Say it even when you know those in opposition may not like what you're saying, but be true to yourself.
The soul era marked a new age of self-determination for African Americans.
You had a choice of colors.
Curtis Mayfield was one of the first black performers to take control of his own music. he set up a publishing company to ensure ownership of his songs.
Usually no artists own themselves or own their own songs, and I sought to change that, at least for myself.
When Curtis talks about owning as much of yourself as possible, we came through a period when guys like John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters and Jimmy Reed, these men, for all intent and purposes, were illiterate, had no education. They never had their own publishing companies. Some of them never even had the copyright on the songs that they made up. And so basically they became musical sharecroppers or musical slaves.
Record companies always kept the publishing rights to songs. That meant labels like Chess owned the music created by their artists.
The perception was that the artist would make his money mostly from appearances, gigging, rather than from record or publishing.
But your publishing is where all your money's at. You don't make no money out here in the streets.
Chess was also accused of shortchanging performers on royalty payments.
If I got $10, you know, they got 10,000. If I got 10,000, they got 10 million. And that's the way it worked.
I don't think it's fair for history to say that Leonard Chess or Chess Records ripped off the black artists any more than BJ or Motown or Atlantic or you name it.
We began to demand things. It's like before we were scared to demand certain things as artists and figured we shouldn't speak because it would hurt our careers or something. But we began to speak, and it helped a lot.
Artists like Curtis Mayfield started taking even more control of their music by forming their own record labels. Curtis and Eddie Thomas launched Cur-Tom Records in 1968. It became a multi-million-dollar label when Curtis scored a 1972 hit film.
Ooh, you're gonna make your fortune by.
The soul era saw a dramatic rise in the popularity of black artists, but it also was the beginning of the end for many independent R&B labels, because major record companies saw that black music could mean big profits. In 1963, VJ's artists were scaling the charts in pop, R&B, blues, jazz, and gospel, but appearances can be deceiving. The label's habit of big spending led to cash flow problems. When bills and royalty payments came due, VJ couldn't pay.
Whenever you're expanding, you always spend more than you're taking in during expansion. And my idea was to expand. I had a serious disagreement with Jimmy and Vivian, and they felt that it was time to retrench. And I said, if you retrench now, we'll be little. We'll go back to being little again, and I don't want to be little. And they said, but we don't want to go in credit. I was going to borrow some money. I was going to get a line of credit. They said, we don't want to borrow money. It's ours.
To make matters worse, rumors began to go around that Abner was gambling with VJ's money.
No, it wasn't true. I didn't gamble with company funds. What people don't know is that I owned a third of the company, and I'm gambling. If I gamble with money, it's my money. So we did. I will say that I believe I helped integrate the crap tables in Las Vegas at the Dunes. Not that that's a worthy achievement or anything, but it's a fact.
I don't know why. There's no sun up in the sky.
They said, no more will you run it. And I said, if I can't run it, I can't be here. And so it wasn't a friendly parting.
Raining all the time.
VJ reorganized with a new president, a former promotion man, Randy Wood. In the transition, a gold mine slipped through the cracks. The Beatles left VJ in August 1963, claiming their royalties weren't being paid. By January of '64, they signed with Capitol Records, the label that had turned them down a year earlier. That same month, their popularity exploded. But VJ still had the master tapes to 15 songs, and they believed they had the right to release them, so they did. Capitol Records sued. VJ didn't have the money to fight a long, drawn-out legal battle, so they settled. The label could continue to release its Beatles songs, but only till the end of the year. The Beatles made VJ one of the highest-grossing record labels in the nation. The company felt ready to take its place alongside the majors and moved its offices to Hollywood. At the same time, VJ's president, Randy Wood, made a critical mistake. He left Calvin Carter, VJ's ear, back in Chicago. Wood tried to repeat the company's previous success with white pop acts, but he didn't have the instincts of Abner and Calvin and repeatedly signed artists that just didn't sell.
I'll set my love to music.
Within 2 years, VJ was near ruin.
I was called back in 1966. I got a call from Vivian and Jimmy said, Ab, I'm in real trouble, and would you come back and help me sort it out? And I said, yes. But when I got out there, there was a fleet of cars, Cadillacs and Lincolns. I mean, talk about spending money. It was just going through the records was just amazing to me. You know, it was amazing to me, and it was gone, and the people, all the people were gone.
Abner was desperate, so he moved the company back to Chicago. He felt the label had one last chance. The Four Seasons still owed VJ an album.
But the deal was I couldn't listen to the album. I just had to take it sight unseen. Could take it without listening to it. Okay. And I said, should I or should I not? I said, okay, they're a big act, they're hot, I'll take it.
Here they are, the Four Seasons!
What they gave me was a live album, some songs that had been done before. But it was not the kind of album that was going to generate the kind of money that we needed.
The label owed $1 million in back taxes. VJ went bankrupt.
I was really desperate when the judge said he was going to sell it off. That was very painful. That was one of the darkest, most unhappiest days of my life.
Raindrops.
A few years later, Abner landed at Motown. Eventually, he became president of the company. Vivian went back home to Gary, Indiana, and took a job as a gospel DJ. Jimmy tried to start another label, but it failed. Calvin Carter continued to produce records, but never again matched the success he had at VJ.
For those of us in the community, you know, they were our champions. They were the best, and we made the best records, and we had the best music, and we gave the best parties. I mean, it was the best.
Chicago's R&B labels pumped out hits long after VJ was gone. But as their success increased, so did the competition from corporate America.
When the majors started to smell money in R&B and black music, they began producing it, you know, using their big bankrolls, buying masters for much more money than we would. And they had promotion men, teams of them, they would get their records on black radio. So the more of their records that went on, the less room there was for these small independent labels.
In 1969, Chess Records, the flagship of Record Row, was sold to an audio tape company.
Time marched on. People all over the country and all over the world began making, you know, R&B music, and it just eluded it. And the pioneers began to die or lose interest, or they got rich, or they got broke.
My brother was tired. He was tired, and I could see it.
Leonard's death in 1969 foreshadowed the fate of Record Row. One by one, they began to shut their doors. First the Leaners, then the new owners of Chess, and in the mid-1970s, the last R&B company on South Michigan Avenue closed its doors. The vibrant recording industry on Record Row was gone, and with it, an R&B community that drove the sound of the black experience across the color line, changing the world of music forever.
If you stay, darling, stay.
A record is, it's your footprint in time, it's your footprint in sand, and these artists have left some magnificent ones, and that's a piece of a guy or a girl's life. And that's their best effort. That's their best effort, and we were able to put it out there, make it available to those who wanted it, you know, to spread it out there, and that's good feeling. I like that stuff.
This program may be seen again tomorrow night at 11:30. And there's more music Saturday night on KCET when Austin City Limits presents a country showcase beginning at 11:30. Followed at 12:30 by Tina Turner, What's Love? Live. Charlie Rose is next.
Major funding for Record Row, Cradle of Rhythm and Blues, was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the Central Educational Network, the Illinois Humanities Council, and the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences.